Hospital CEO dragged shy nurse to the bathroom, unaware her Marine General husband was standing nearby. What happened next is unbelievable. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and also let us know where you are watching from in the comments. And also, don't forget to download the ebook titled How to Find Purpose Again, a simple guide for life after retirement, by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Enjoy the story. It was on a Tuesday morning when it all happened. Olivia Grant, a 22-year-old nurse, resumed her shift at the bustling Miami General Hospital, ready to give her best like she always did. She had always been diligent, never one to take shortcuts in her work, making sure that every patient's file was meticulously kept. But that morning, as she walked through the hospital's quiet, sterile hallways, she had no idea that she was about to stumble upon something that would forever alter the course of her life. Olivia was deep into her usual routine when she sat down at the desk in the hospital's records room. The flickering fluorescent lights above cast a sterile glow over the stacks of paper and patient files laid out before her. Her shift was the late one, the kind where the hospital seemed to breathe with a quiet rhythm. The night shift nurses were taking their breaks, and the day shift doctors were just arriving, pulling on their white coats. As the room grew quieter, Olivia's focus deepened. That night, she had volunteered to go over the billing statements, a task she normally didn't mind. She'd always had a thing for numbers. But tonight, something felt off. As she sifted through the records, she noticed a particular set of charges under the name of Dr. Brian Caldwell, the head of the hospital's prestigious cardiology department. At first glance, it seemed like a small mistake, perhaps an oversight from the billing department. But the more she dug, the more suspicious the charges seemed. Large sums, unexplainable extras, and numerous inconsistencies kept popping up under Caldwell's name. A few $100s here, 1,000 there, adding up to a staggering total. Olivia felt a tight knot form in her stomach. She knew the hospital well. It was one of the largest in the city, and the CEO, Richard Walker, was a well-respected figure with an impeccable reputation. He was a man whose name had been synonymous with success, a leader who had steered the hospital to the top. Yet here she was, questioning the integrity of the institution she had worked for since graduating from nursing school. Her hands began to shake slightly as she continued her search, uncovering more and more discrepancies in the records. She had stumbled onto something much larger than a simple mistake. This wasn't just bad accounting, it was fraud. Olivia paused, staring at the screen of her computer. The weight of the situation hit her like a wave. She knew that by bringing this to light, she would be going up against some of the most powerful figures in the hospital. And yet, she also knew that she couldn't turn a blind eye. She had always prided herself on doing the right thing, even when it wasn't easy. Her mind raced, considering the consequences. Confronting the fraud could cost her job, or worse, her career. Richard Walker was a formidable man, charismatic, influential, and ruthless in his dealings. He'd built an empire with this hospital, and Olivia was just a small cog in the wheel. But then, as she stared at the damning evidence before her, her resolve hardened. She had to do something. Her pulse quickened, but she knew she couldn't let this slide. Olivia began to document every charge, every inconsistency. She jotted down notes, her handwriting shaky but deliberate, knowing this could be the key to exposing something bigger than anyone could imagine. She gathered all the evidence she could find, carefully hiding it in her file before heading to the office of the CEO, Richard Walker. It was time to face the truth. As Olivia made her way to the top floor of the hospital, her heart began to race. The building, usually so familiar and comforting, now felt oppressive. She could feel the weight of what she was about to do bearing down on her. Richard's office was large, pristine, and imposing, much like the man who sat behind the desk. She had heard stories about him, how he could charm anyone, manipulate any situation, and get things done his way. He was a man who didn't take kindly to anyone questioning his authority. Olivia took a deep breath before knocking on his door. "Come in," came Richard's voice from the other side, calm and authoritative. As she entered, she immediately felt the cold air of the office. His cold demeanor hit her like a wall. Richard was seated behind his massive desk, flipping through some files, looking as composed as ever. Olivia cleared her throat. "Mr. Walker," she began, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I need to talk to you about some discrepancies I've found in the billing records." Richard didn't look up, but his brow furrowed slightly. Discrepancies? He repeated, his tone dismissive. What are you talking about, Nurse Grant? I've been reviewing the records for Dr. Caldwell's department. Olivia continued, her voice growing more confident as she spoke. And there are multiple instances of overcharging, extra services that were never provided. I think someone's been skimming off the top. Richard finally looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to cold calculation. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Are you accusing Dr. Caldwell of something, Olivia? He asked, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. I'm not accusing anyone, Olivia replied quickly. I'm just reporting what I found. I think it's important that we— Enough, Richard interrupted, standing up from his desk, his voice raising. You're being paranoid, Olivia. This is not how we do things here. His eyes narrowed. I think it's time for you to stop digging and let it go. There's nothing to see here. Olivia stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. But— No buts, Richard snapped, his voice low and threatening now. If you continue to pursue this, there will be consequences. Do you understand me? Olivia felt her breath catch in her throat. There it was, the subtle threat, the warning that anyone who dared to stand up to him would be crushed. But Olivia wasn't backing down. She had come too far, and she wasn't about to turn away. I understand, she said quietly, though inside, her heart was pounding. But I'm not letting this go. Richard's cold stare bore into her for a moment longer before he turned away, heading back to his desk. You'll regret this, Olivia, he muttered under his breath, the menace in his voice palpable. Now get out of my office. Olivia hesitated for a moment, her mind swirling with doubt, but then she turned and walked out of the room, her resolve strengthening with each step. She knew what she had to do now. She had to make this right, no matter the cost. Later that evening, Olivia was alone in the records room once again, reviewing her findings one final time. She had already sent a copy of her notes to her personal email, but something about the night felt off. The hospital was quiet, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning. As she looked over the documents one last time, a shadow fell over her. She didn't hear the door open, but she felt the presence of someone behind her. Olivia, came the voice of Richard Walker, this time laced with anger. You've gone too far. Before she could react, he grabbed her by the arm and shoved her hard against the wall. Pain shot through her body as her back hit the cold tiles. You think you can just walk around here digging into my business? Richard's voice was low, seething with rage. You're nothing, Olivia. You have no idea who you're messing with. Olivia's vision blurred as his grip tightened on her arm, his face mere inches from hers. She tried to pull away, but he was too strong. Just as she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the door to the records room flew open with a crash. In a flash, a man moved in, grabbing Richard's arm and twisting it away from Olivia. Get your hands off my wife, came a voice that Olivia knew all too well, her husband, General Ethan Grant. He stood between Olivia and Richard, his posture rigid, his eyes blazing with the fury of a man who had just witnessed his wife in danger. Richard, now released from Ethan's grip, stumbled back. This is none of your business, Grant, Richard sneered. Ethan's gaze never wavered. It is now. In that moment, Olivia's heart surged with relief, and though her body ached from the force of Richard's attack, she knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had a partner in this fight, a partner who wouldn't let her face the corruption of the hospital alone. The tension in the room was thick, but Olivia knew that this was just the beginning. They had uncovered something huge, and now they had to see it through. Richard had no idea what was coming next, and neither did Olivia. After the confrontation with Richard Walker, Ethan and Olivia retreated to their small apartment in Miami, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. The adrenaline from the altercation had worn off, leaving a quiet tension between them. Ethan had always been a man of action, someone who had faced life-and-death situations on the battlefield. But this was different. This was corporate corruption, something far more insidious, and the stakes were far higher. He could see it in Olivia's eyes. The determination that had ignited in her the moment she discovered the fraud was now burning brighter than ever. They couldn't do this alone. Richard Walker was a powerful man with vast resources, and they needed a team, trusted allies who would stand by them, no matter the risk. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the room, trying to piece together the best course of action. Olivia, on the other hand, was already on her phone, reaching out to people who could help. "Olivia," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We need to be smart about this. We can't just barge in and hope for the best. If we're going to take down Walker, we need a plan." She nodded, her fingers tapping swiftly on the screen. "I know. That's why I'm calling Nina and Daniel. We're going to need all the help we can get." Nina was a cybersecurity expert, sharp, resourceful, and one of Olivia's oldest friends from nursing school. She had always been the tech genius, the one who could crack passwords, find hidden files, and navigate any firewall. Nina's skills would be crucial in getting to the heart of the financial discrepancies Olivia had uncovered. They needed access to the hospital's internal records, something Richard had locked down tightly, and Nina was the key to breaking that lock. Daniel, on the other hand, was Olivia's cousin. He was a legal advisor with a sharp mind for business law, specializing in corporate fraud cases. He had helped her in the past with smaller legal matters, but this was on a whole different scale. Daniel's knowledge of the legal system and how to work around the red tape would be critical in ensuring that their actions were within the bounds of the law as much as possible. They were about to walk a fine line between justice and danger, and Daniel's experience would guide them through it. Within hours, the team was assembled. Nina arrived at their apartment first, her eyes scanning the room as she greeted them with her usual sharp grin. "All right, let's get to work," she said, her voice filled with confidence. Daniel arrived shortly after, his demeanor calm but focused. He wasted no time in sitting down with Olivia and Ethan to go over the details of what they were up against. They laid out the evidence Olivia had gathered, billing discrepancies, overcharges, and suspicious payments. "This is just the tip of the iceberg," Daniel said, flipping through the pages. "Richard Walker has deep ties to a lot of powerful people, and the more we dig, the more we're going to uncover. This isn't just a case of overcharging patients. It's systemic corruption." Olivia and Ethan exchanged glances, both feeling the weight of the situation. "Nina, we need you to get into the hospital's financial records," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the tension. "We need to know exactly where the money's going. Who is he paying? And who's paying him?" Nina nodded, her fingers already flying over her phone as she started preparing for the digital heist. "I'll need access to the hospital's network," she said. "That'll take a bit of time. But once I'm in, we'll have everything we need." As Nina worked her magic, Daniel turned his attention to the legal aspects. "We'll need more than just financial records to bring Richard down," he said. "We need to build a case that shows a clear pattern of illegal activity, money laundering, kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies, you name it. The goal is to have enough evidence that we can take this to the authorities, but also have a backup plan in case they try to bury it." For the next few days, the team worked in secret, each member focused on their part of the investigation. Ethan and Olivia spent their days gathering additional evidence, while Nina worked tirelessly to infiltrate the hospital's financial systems. The walls of the apartment felt smaller each day as the danger of what they were doing grew clearer. Every phone call, every meeting, every document they gathered could potentially put them all in harm's way. Richard had eyes everywhere, and even the smallest mistake could ruin everything. But despite the fear, there was an undeniable sense of purpose among them. The closer they got to exposing Richard's empire, the clearer it became that they were fighting for something much larger than just a corrupt CEO. They were fighting for the integrity of the hospital, the people who worked there, and the patients who trusted the institution with their lives. By the end of the week, Nina had successfully breached the hospital's security and accessed the financial records. The information she uncovered was staggering. Richard Walker's network of corruption was far more extensive than they had imagined. He was not only involved in fraudulent billing practices, but also in money laundering schemes, kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies, and embezzlement from hospital funds. It was a tangled web of greed, deceit, and manipulation. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked, her voice tight as she scanned the documents Nina had retrieved. "We go public," Daniel replied, his voice firm. "But we do it strategically. We need to expose this in a way that forces the authorities to take action. We can't just send these documents to the press and hope for the best. We need to control the narrative." Ethan nodded in agreement, his expression grim. "We'll use the media, but we also need to make sure we have enough legal support to back us up. If we do this wrong, it could backfire on us." The plan was set into motion. They had gathered enough evidence to expose Richard's illegal activities, but they needed to take the right steps to ensure the information would be used to bring him down. The team would leak the information to trusted journalists, ensuring that it reached the public and the authorities. They would use Nina's hacking skills to gather even more evidence, leaving no stone unturned. And Daniel would handle the legal side, making sure that they had the protection they needed as they took on a man who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. But as the plan unfolded, Olivia's thoughts kept drifting back to the risks they were taking. She knew that exposing Richard would change everything. It wasn't just about bringing down a corrupt CEO. It was about facing a system that had been broken for years. It was about challenging the people in power, the ones who thought they could get away with anything because of their wealth and influence. What would happen to their lives once they exposed the truth? Would they become targets, or would they be hailed as heroes? The uncertainty of it all loomed over them, but they knew one thing for certain. They couldn't stop now. They were in too deep, and the only way out was through. What would you have done if you were in Olivia's shoes? Would you have confronted Richard, or stayed quiet to protect your job? Drop a comment below and let us know. The tension in the room was palpable. Olivia and Ethan had spent the past few weeks planning every detail, and now the day had finally come. After days of gathering evidence, talking to allies, and making sure everything was in place, they were ready. The time to confront Richard Walker, the CEO of Miami General Hospital, had arrived. It was a gamble, a dangerous one, but Olivia and Ethan knew it was the only way to expose the corruption that had run rampant in the hospital for far too long. Ethan sat across from Olivia, his expression intense but focused. He had been by her side through it all, and now, as they prepared for the public reveal, the weight of their actions felt even heavier. They were about to take down an empire, a man who had manipulated, exploited, and used his position to profit at the expense of so many. But there was no turning back now. "I can't believe this is really happening," Olivia said, her voice shaking slightly as she looked over the final documents. "It feels like we're about to step into the lion's den." Ethan's gaze softened as he reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "We're doing the right thing. You've always known that, Olivia. This is the only way we can stop him." She nodded, though the anxiety gnawing at her gut was hard to ignore. For months, she had quietly gathered evidence, each piece more damning than the last. From fraudulent billing practices to money laundering and kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies, Richard's corruption ran deep. Olivia had seen it firsthand. Now, it was time to let the world see the truth. They had contacted a trusted journalist, Sarah Malone, a reporter known for her investigative work and her unyielding pursuit of justice. After meeting with Sarah privately, they handed over all the evidence, everything they had uncovered. Sarah wasted no time, reaching out to her contacts, setting up interviews, and contacting the media outlets that would be most affected by such a story. The plan was set in motion. But Olivia and Ethan weren't content with just leaking the information. They needed to make sure the revelation would hit hard, that it would be undeniable. They wanted Richard to experience the full force of his actions. So, they devised a plan, a confrontation that would happen in front of the hospital's board, staff, and the media. The day of the meeting, Richard would have no idea what was coming. As the morning sun rose, Olivia stood in front of the mirror, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. She had come a long way from the timid nurse who had first uncovered the fraud. Now, she was a force to be reckoned with. But even as she dressed, choosing a simple yet professional outfit, her mind raced with the gravity of what they were about to do. Richard Walker wasn't just a CEO. He was a powerful figure in Miami, someone with connections in every corner of the city. Exposing him wouldn't just ruin his career, it would change everything. Ethan, ever the protector, stood by her side, offering a reassuring smile. "You've got this, Olivia. We've got this." The couple made their way to the hospital, where the board meeting was set to take place. Richard was already there, walking into the conference room with his usual air of confidence. He was unaware that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. He greeted his colleagues, his staff, and the media with his usual charm, never once suspecting that his empire was about to fall apart. The room filled quickly with anticipation. Reporters, hospital staff, and board members gathered, all of them curious about the nature of the special meeting that had been called. Richard stood at the front, taking his seat, his eyes scanning the room with practiced ease. He was, after all, the man who had built Miami General Hospital into what it was today, a giant in the healthcare industry. But Olivia and Ethan were about to show him that no one, not even the most powerful, could escape the consequences of their actions. The moment came. Sarah Malone entered the room, and with her came a sense of urgency that rippled through the air. The press were ready, their cameras set, their notebooks out. Olivia stood, her heart racing, her breath shallow. She locked eyes with Ethan, who gave her an encouraging nod. Together, they walked to the front of the room, where they were joined by Sarah and a few trusted allies. Richard's smile faltered slightly as he saw the determined look in Olivia's eyes. He had no idea what was coming, but he could feel the tension shift in the room. Olivia spoke first, her voice steady but full of authority. "Thank you all for gathering today," she said, addressing the room. "We've called this meeting to address a matter of great importance, one that has been affecting not only the integrity of this hospital, but the trust of the people we serve." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his smile now gone. He opened his mouth to speak, but Olivia raised her hand, signaling for him to remain silent. "For months," she continued, "I've been gathering evidence of serious misconduct within this hospital. Fraudulent billing, overcharging patients, and even money laundering. This isn't just a case of bad accounting. This is systemic corruption at the highest levels." Gasps filled the room as the staff and board members looked around at each other, their shock evident. Richard's face turned pale as he finally realized what was happening. "Olivia, this is absurd," Richard said, his voice trembling with disbelief. "You don't know what you're talking about." But Olivia didn't flinch. "I know exactly what I'm talking about, Richard. And so do all of these people. They've seen it. They've been part of it. And today, we're going to expose the truth." At that moment, Sarah Malone stood up, holding a folder full of documents. "Here is the evidence," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "These are the financial records, the kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies, the secret accounts, the money that's been funneled away from the hospital and into Richard Walker's pockets. It's all here, and it's all being made public today." Richard's expression twisted into one of rage. "This is nothing but slander," he yelled, standing up abruptly. "You can't just—" But it was too late. The truth was already out. The room was in chaos as reporters began to shout questions, their cameras flashing in every direction. The board members looked at each other, some with shock, others with dawning realization. The hospital's top brass, once too scared to challenge Richard, now began to murmur among themselves, their faces pale as they absorbed the full scope of the scandal. Richard tried to leave, but the police, who had been waiting outside, stepped into the room. The whispers grew louder, and in that moment, Olivia saw Richard's world begin to crumble. The facade of respectability he had built for years was shattered, and there was no escaping the consequences. "Richard Walker, you're under arrest for money laundering, bribery, and fraud," the officer said, his voice firm. "You have the right to remain silent." The room fell into stunned silence as Richard was handcuffed and escorted out. Olivia stood there, her heart racing, but a sense of triumph beginning to swell within her. She had done it. They had done it. As the police took Richard away, the media erupted into a frenzy. Ethan stood beside Olivia, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Together, they had exposed the truth. Together, they had brought down one of the most powerful men in the city. The hospital was in disarray, but Olivia and Ethan knew that their fight for justice had been worth every risk. They had taken on a corrupt system, and in the end, they had won. Do you think it was the right decision to go public? What would you have done if you were in Olivia and Ethan's position? Let us know in the comments below. In the days following Richard Walker's arrest, Miami General Hospital was a place of upheaval. The scandal had rocked the healthcare community to its core. The media frenzy that had erupted with the public reveal had subsided, but the hospital was far from recovering. Its reputation was in tatters, its leadership in disarray. Yet, in the midst of this chaos, something extraordinary began to take shape. Olivia Grant stood at the heart of it all, watching as the hospital began its long road to recovery. The walls, once cold and impersonal, now seemed to hold a promise of something new. A promise of transparency, of integrity, and of healing, not just for the patients, but for the institution itself. It wasn't going to be an easy journey, but Olivia was ready. After everything she had fought for, after all the risks she had taken, this was the moment where her quiet courage had blossomed into something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. The change started with the leadership. The board of directors had swiftly made the decision to overhaul the entire hospital's management. Richard Walker's influence was eradicated, and in his place, a new team was brought in, one that believed in transparency, accountability, and ethical practices. The old guard had been swept away, and the fresh blood that was injected into the hospital was determined to rebuild it from the ground up. And then came the news that Olivia had been offered a higher position. At first, it felt surreal to her. The woman who had once been a quiet nurse, unsure of her place in the world, was now being asked to lead a transformation. She would be heading a new initiative to ensure that ethical practices were upheld throughout the hospital. It was a role she never could have imagined for herself just months ago, but now it felt like a natural progression. Ethan, who had been by her side through every step of this journey, couldn't help but smile as he watched Olivia walk into their apartment that evening, the weight of the day's events hanging on her shoulders. "How does it feel?" he asked, his voice soft yet filled with pride. Olivia sank into the couch beside him, the reality of what had just happened slowly settling in. "It's overwhelming," she admitted, her eyes reflecting the storm of emotions inside her. "But I'm ready. I have to be." Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've earned this, Olivia. You've fought for what's right, and now, you get to shape the future of this hospital." As they sat together, reflecting on how far they had come, Olivia couldn't help but think back to the early days, before the fraud, before the confrontation, before they had even begun to challenge the system. She had been a young nurse, just starting out in a job that was supposed to be her calling. She had never imagined that she would find herself leading a revolution within the very institution she had once trusted. She had never imagined that she, Olivia Grant, would become a symbol of courage in the face of corruption. But here she was. Over the next few weeks, the hospital began to undergo sweeping reforms. The first priority was the new billing system. Olivia worked closely with a team of financial experts to design a transparent system that would prevent any further fraudulent activity. Every transaction would be scrutinized, and every charge would be accounted for. No longer would the hospital operate in the shadows, where overcharging and unethical billing practices could go unnoticed. The new system ensured that every bill was transparent, clear, and just. Alongside the billing overhaul, the hospital also implemented anonymous harassment reporting. The toxic culture that had allowed Richard Walker and his allies to flourish was being dismantled piece by piece. Now, staff could report any instance of bullying, misconduct, or harassment without fear of retaliation. The leadership made it clear that everyone, from the janitors to the doctors, would be treated with respect. It was a fundamental shift in the culture of the hospital, one that Olivia was proud to lead. But the changes didn't stop there. The hospital also introduced a new commitment to ethical medical practices. Under the old leadership, there had been corners cut, shortcuts taken, and profits prioritized over patient care. Olivia and her team worked tirelessly to ensure that every medical procedure was performed with the utmost integrity. New protocols were put in place to guarantee that patients would always be treated with the highest level of care, and no decision would ever again be made with money as the primary motivation. As these changes began to take root, Olivia's role as a leader grew. She became the face of the hospital's transformation, the symbol of courage and resilience in the face of corruption. Her leadership inspired others to speak up, to come forward with their own stories of mistreatment, of unethical behavior, and of the fear they had felt in the past. People who had once been too scared to rock the boat now found the courage to stand up for what was right, and Olivia was there to guide them every step of the way. But Olivia knew that the journey was far from over. The hospital had a long way to go before it could fully rebuild its reputation, and there were still challenges to face. There would be those who resisted the changes, those who clung to the old ways. The fight for integrity and transparency would be an ongoing battle. But Olivia had never backed down from a challenge before, and she wasn't about to start now. As the weeks turned into months, the hospital began to slowly transform from a symbol of greed and corruption into a beacon of trust and accountability. Patients came back, reassured by the hospital's commitment to ethical practices. The staff, once demoralized, now had hope for the future. Olivia's leadership had ignited a spark, and that spark was starting to turn into a flame. One evening, as Olivia stood in the hospital's lobby, watching as staff and patients moved through the space, she felt a sense of pride unlike anything she had ever known. The hospital was no longer the place it once was. It was something better, something worth fighting for. And it was only the beginning. "Hey," Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing by her side, a soft smile on his face. "I was thinking we could take a break. Maybe a weekend getaway? Just the two of us." Olivia smiled back, the weight of the world on her shoulders lightening just for a moment. "I think that sounds perfect." As they walked out of the hospital, hand in hand, Olivia reflected on how far they had come. From a quiet nurse, unsure of her place in the world, to the leader of a movement for justice and integrity. From a general fighting battle in far-off lands to the protector of the woman he loved. Together, they had taken on a corrupt system, exposed the truth, and set the foundation for something better. This was just the beginning. The hospital was on its way to healing, but so was Olivia, and the fight for integrity was far from over. As they stepped into the future, the only thing Olivia knew for sure was that she would continue to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. And the world was watching. The sun was beginning to set as Olivia and Ethan stood side by side outside Miami General Hospital. The once imposing, sterile building now looked different to Olivia. Its walls, which had once been symbols of secrecy and corruption, now seemed to hold the promise of something better. The hospital, after all the upheaval and the fight, had finally begun to transform. The new leadership was in place, the reforms had taken root, and the foundation for a brighter future had been set. Olivia looked at the hospital, her heart swelling with pride, but also with a quiet realization. The battle they had fought was only the beginning. Her journey had taken her from a nurse who stumbled upon a fraudulent billing system to a leader who had helped dismantle a system built on greed and manipulation. The changes they had fought for, ethical practices, transparency, and fairness, had become part of the hospital's fabric. But Olivia knew that the fight for justice didn't end here. It couldn't. Ethan, standing next to her, squeezed her hand, his presence a grounding force in the midst of the chaos that had been their life for the past few months. He had been with her through every step of this journey, and she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the support he had shown her. It was hard to believe that just a year ago, they had been two ordinary people, doing their jobs, living their lives, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" Olivia asked, her voice soft as she gazed up at the building. Ethan smiled, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and relief. "All the time," he said. "We've come a long way. From fighting Richard in his office to standing here, knowing that everything we've done is going to make a difference. It feels surreal, doesn't it?" Olivia nodded, but there was no time to linger on the past. The present was too urgent, too full of possibilities. She felt the weight of the responsibility they had taken on, but it was a weight she no longer feared. The road ahead might be long, but it was a road they would walk together. "It's funny," Olivia continued, her voice carrying a touch of awe. "When I first uncovered all of this, I was terrified. Terrified of losing my job, of losing everything. But now, looking at everything we've accomplished, I realize it was worth it. It had to be done. We had to expose the truth." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the hospital, watching as staff and patients moved in and out of the building, a sense of normalcy returning to the once chaotic environment. Integrity has a way of changing things. It's funny, isn't it? The world's so used to seeing power and corruption at the top, but it's the small, quiet acts of integrity that end up shifting the tides. Olivia's gaze softened as she looked toward the future, her thoughts swirling with a new sense of hope. "I never thought I'd be here, leading a movement like this. I was just a nurse, a small part of the machine. But now, I realize that even the smallest voices can make the loudest impact. We've proven that." She squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling his strength in the way he held her. There was something in the way he looked at her, proud, but also full of hope for what was to come. He was right. They had accomplished something monumental, but the real work was only just beginning. The hospital had begun to heal, but what about the world outside its walls? What about the other institutions, the other systems, that were still entrenched in corruption and deceit. Olivia knew there was no end to the fight for justice. There would always be battles to fight, but she was ready. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, turning to face Ethan, "about what comes next. This hospital, what we've done here, it's just the beginning. There's so much more to do, Ethan. So many other places that need this kind of change. It's not just about one hospital. It's about the industry, about healthcare in general. We've shown that it's possible to create a space where people come first, where integrity is the foundation. I think we need to help others do the same." Ethan's expression was thoughtful. "I agree. The work we've done here could be a model for other institutions. But it's not just about implementing policies or changes. It's about shifting the entire culture from the top down. That's going to take time and a lot of work." Olivia nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I'm ready for it. The fight for justice isn't just about taking down the corrupt. It's about making sure there's a better system in place, one that puts people before profit." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with pride as he looked at Olivia. "Then let's do it. Let's take what we've learned here and spread it. We've already made one hospital a better place. Now, it's time to take that same energy and make the world better." They stood there for a moment, hand in hand, gazing at the hospital that had been both the battleground and the symbol of their victory. For so long, it had represented everything they had fought against: greed, corruption, and exploitation. But now, it was something else entirely. It was a beacon of hope, of what could be achieved when people refused to stand by in silence. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their journey, but also the lightness that came with knowing they had made a real difference. She was no longer the quiet nurse in the background, uncertain of her place. She was a leader, a voice for justice, someone who had found her purpose not in avoiding the fight, but in standing up for what was right. "I think we've made a lasting impact," she said quietly, her gaze lingering on the hospital. "But we can't stop here. We've only just started." Ethan nodded, his voice full of certainty. "This is only the beginning, Olivia, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together." With that, they turned away from the hospital, their footsteps in sync as they walked into the future. There was still so much work to be done, but as they walked hand in hand, they both knew one thing for sure: they were ready. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Drop your thoughts on the story in the comments. What did you think about Olivia and Ethan's journey, and how it all ended? Rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. We'd love to hear from you. Also, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. We appreciate your support and can't wait to hear your thoughts.